Conor McGregor, Eddie Alvarez, just a few short weeks away. Right now, Kenny, Conor McGregor holding as a minus 140 favorite. Eddie Alvarez is the plus 110 underdog. Again, I've said I see value on the Conor McGregor side before. We're polling all of our guests leading up to the fight as to where they might fall on this fight. And I know at least right now, a few weeks out from our conversations off the air, you are leaning in Conor's direction, yes?
I am, and I'm kind of surprised at how many people are going with Eddie Alvarez. I think Eddie certainly has a good chance of winning the fight. I just think with Eddie's propensity of kind of getting into these brawls, you got to like Conor's chances because of it. And I also think that people are really downgrading Conor's performance against Nate Diaz in his last fight.
I agree, and you and I really believe that McGregor's frame is custom built for this weight class, and I think this is where he's going to do the bulk of his damage in the UFC, whether as the champion or a perennial contender type. So Conor McGregor right now at least is a slight favorite in the co-main event UFC welterweight championship. Got to think people are going to see some value on Tyron Woodley. He has the belt. He has the experience of that recent title fight. Woodley right now plus 160, Kenny, to defend the title. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, the minus 190 favorite to bring the gold back to South Carolina.
Yeah, I find that interesting. Well, listen, with Tyron Woodley, I think he's going to have that threat of the takedown in the mind of Wonderboy Thompson, in the hopes that it shuts down his striking a little bit, that Wonderboy becomes hesitant moving forward. And we also can't forget about Woodley's speed. This guy can close the gap just as quickly as Thompson in a different way, but with his right hand. So I think it's a fascinating fight. It's a great fight. It's going to be fun while it lasts. And I think if Woodley can get off to a good start, a quick start like he usually does, he's going to be tough to beat. I do favor Wonderboy as that fight kind of moves past the second round.
We've had both of those guys on the podcast here within the last month. We might grab Woodley again if he can step away from Champ Camp. How good is Champ Camp, by the way, Ken Flo?
I love it. In the videos. Very good.
Yeah, so we might have Woodley again. We talked to Stephen Thompson a couple weeks ago. He was pretty dismissive of some of the things we had suggested about, Duke Rufus seeing some things on tape that maybe he can exploit, mistakes that other opponents have made in the past. But gosh, there is such a confidence that beams off of Wonderboy when you suggest that somebody might be able to figure out his style. So he's unbeaten, of course, since the Matt Brown fight in 2012. And just a fascinating fight for me. I know you said it might be the fight of the night for you. I just am really curious to see how that fight plays out, at least from a betting standpoint, though. I'll admit to being surprised this morning and seeing Woodley as high as plus 170 in some spots. My prediction for the fight of the night at UFC 205, the strawweight championship fight, Joanna Jędrzejczyk right now a minus 375 favorite. The comeback on her fellow Pole, Karolina Kowalkiewicz at plus 305. Prohibitive price here on Jędrzejczyk, Kenny. Now, you remember when she fought Claudia Gadelha, it was a very close fight, at least according to Las Vegas. I think it closed with maybe Joanna around minus 150 or so, maybe not even that high, but a near 4-1 favorite as she takes on Kowalkiewicz November 12th at MSG.
Well, I love this fight. Two undefeated Polish fighters going at it here. I think that Joanna's speed is still going to be a factor for Karolina, who also likes to brawl. She loves to show her toughness. So she might be getting a beating from Joanna Jędrzejczyk. However, I do think she needs to mix things up and try to test the grappling skills of Joanna. I think Kowalkiewicz is going to be the better grappler, the better submission fighter out there. So she's got to find a way to put this fight on the mat, get Joanna tired somehow. But seeing that last fight against Gadelha, if Gadelha can't do it, then I don't know if there's any other fighter out there that can do it. And Joanna is continuing to get better, training at ATT, and that spells even more doom for her opponents.
Yeah, I want to get to the American top team angle in a second, but maybe someone like Jessica Andrade has the power to really get Joanna Jędrzejczyk out of there. I'm not sure I see Kowalkiewicz in that class. I think for you, you're right. She's got to mix it up. She's got to try to extend the fight. But, man, Gadelha obviously landed some power shots, and the recoverability for Joanna Jędrzejczyk just absurd. So at least right now, her chin has held up. Again, huge price. So you're paying the price on Jędrzejczyk, as we mentioned, minus 375, minus 360 in some other spots. But I really feel like Jessica Andrade, Joanna Jędrzejczyk is the most interesting stylistic clash that can be put together next to the title fight that you're going to get at UFC 205. Now, as far as the American Top Team angle is concerned, Kenny, it was sort of interesting to hear Mike Brown recount it for us a week ago, how it was sort of just an undercover, sort of behind-the-scenes phone call that came in from Mike Brown about the possibility of her training there. And I know Mike said this on our show repeatedly, but, I mean, what else can be said about Jędrzejczyk that after the Gadelha fight, all she's thinking about is, how can I make sure I stay ahead of the Joneses? And moves everything to American Top Team in Coconut Creek, Florida. Most people think it'll pay dividends here coming up on November 12th, but at this stage of her career, undefeated, the timing, I think, is pretty perfect, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how Joanna goes about trying to take her game to the next level.
Yeah, I think it's a great fit for her as well. But we've seen it before where you see a move in camps and things are done differently. The way that she's used to training can be different, and that can throw off a fighter as well. I don't think that's going to be the case for Joanna, but it's something to be aware of.
Do you think the Gadelha fight raised some concerns for her, or there were any red flags that made her think I really need to shore some things up? Because ultimately it certainly wasn't broken. It wasn't a perfect fight against Gadelha. But it wasn't broken, yet she seemed to want to take this step.
Without a doubt, that is a part of it. She just isn't going to get the same kind of wrestling training. She isn't going to get the same kind of jiu-jitsu training in Poland as she is in the United States. That's just a fact. I also heard that perhaps some of the business practices that she was involved with maybe some of the people around her weren't the best situation for her. Yeah. And I heard that she was trying to get out of Poland because of that. But more than anything else, I mean, when you're looking at these big teams that have access to way more sparring partners, way more, advanced ideas as far as training, you got to take it. And I think that's what you want to do.
All right, moving up the main card, UFC 205 at Madison Square Garden. We're going to talk to Chris Weidman here coming up in about 10 minutes. He's the minus 185 favorite, Kenny. Yoel Romero at plus 150 right now. Again, we talk about underdogs in mixed martial arts. And when you're betting any sport, ultimately you're betting the number and not the team or the athlete. And you have to recognize that. You're betting a number. Tattoo it on your inner left forearm if you have to. You're not betting the fighter. You're betting the number. And in MMA, oftentimes the underdog number is more appetizing to me. What do you think about Weidman right now, minus 185 against Yoel Romero?
I think it's pretty interesting, and I think that's relatively accurate. I think Chris Weidman has been more consistent. When he is healthy, you know what you're going to get with Chris Weidman. Yoel Romero sometimes can fall asleep during fights and make mistakes where he's getting caught with big shots. He does fade later in the fight, so I think that's pretty accurate measurement.
Now, a sharp bettor would hate to hear me say this, but some people might throw out there, Chris Weidman's just going to be hard to beat in that building that night. And certainly when you're fighting at home as he is here, it can go one of two ways. Well, it can go one of any number of different ways, but it can really be something that buoys you, or it can be something that emotionally is harder for you to deal with. I think for Weidman, he's going to be buoyed by that crowd, and I think you're going to have to knock him unconscious to beat him that night. So Weidman Romero, another fight on the main card, UFC 205. Donald Cowboy Cerrone, Kenny, minus 170. Kelvin Gastelum is plus 140. And I can just see Joe Silva in his basement with the octagon to his left making this fight. And I know it wasn't the fight that was initially made. Of course, that was going to be Donald Cerrone and Robbie Lawler, but just sort of smiling as he puts this fight together sort of on his way out the door. I'm really excited to see them close the octagon door behind Cerrone and Gastelum November 12th.
Yeah, this is another one that's just ridiculous. I've been seeing Kelvin a lot in and around the studio in Burbank and stuff, and been able to talk to him about his training. He's been training extremely hard, already getting the weight down and taking this fight very seriously. Obviously, beating a guy like Cerrone is huge for his career. That's a big name. And with what Cerrone has been doing at 170 pounds, I think it'd be a big win as well. So Kelvin realizes how important this is. Cerrone has been on an absolute tear and wants to continue on that tear at 170 pounds. Never looked better, man. Very confident. I think size-wise, he's going to have some problems with Kelvin. Has to stay moving and has to stop those takedowns.
Not a fight that I would be racing to the window to bet, but I certainly can't wait to watch it. And rounding out the main card, actually, this is the main card opener at Madison Square Garden in the bantamweight division. Raquel Pennington, a plus 167 underdog. Misha Tate is the minus 205 favorite there, so maybe some value on the underdog, Rocky Pennington there. Prelims on FS1, Kenny, the featured prelim in the featherweight division. Frankie Edgar, minus 360. Jeremy Stevens is plus 280. Jeremy Stevens is in the cardiovascular shape of his life. He has more power than almost anyone at 145 pounds. And with all due respect to the future Hall of Famer Frankie Edgar, who might be my favorite guy on the roster, Stevens shouldn't be anywhere close to plus 280, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think Jeremy Stevens probably has a little bit better chance than that. When you talk about his power, and sometimes Frankie's, propensity for getting hit, I think that, it should be a little bit closer. Stevens loves to stand up and fight. I think he's got to stop those takedowns. If he can do that, he definitely has a good chance. Frankie Edgar is not going to stop moving out there. That's one thing Stevens needs to be aware of and just needs to stay calm and composed throughout that night. But what an amazing fight. I mean, that's how good this card is when you have Frankie Edgar and Jeremy Stevens as the prelim, as the main prelim on FS1. That's ridiculous.
This card is embarrassing, the talent. It is unbelievable. And to think that it could leave UFC 200 in the dust, I mean, that's exactly what it's doing, at least as I look at this on paper. And by the way, I just checked bookmaker.eu. They've got Frankie Edgar minus 305 and Jeremy Stevens plus 250. So plus 280 I saw this morning, probably about as good a price as you'll get on Lil Heathen against Frankie Edgar. Lightweight division here, Kenny, again, this is not on pay-per-view. You're essentially getting a pay-per-view on FS1 on November 12th. Khabib Nurmagomedov minus 270. Michael Johnson plus 225. Your thoughts?
Another amazing fight. Khabib, I know he's been at AKA for a little while now. This is a guy who spars regularly and moves around regularly with Luke Rockhold. And this is how strong and how confident they are in Khabib. The fact that he can move around with a guy as big and as good as Luke Rockhold. But Michael Johnson really could be a spoiler here in this fight. I know people are going to say I'm crazy, but Michael Johnson can wrestle from the outside. In the clinch, he might not be as good as Khabib Nurmagomedov, but if he can stay moving like he can, if he can keep the pace that he kept against a guy like Edson Barbosa and stay busy, stop those takedowns, and perhaps pressure Khabib, who doesn't like moving backwards in a fight, he might be able to pull off an upset here. Khabib obviously has been very vocal about getting that next title shot. He needs to win, and he needs to win impressively. So I think there's a little bit of pressure on him to go out there and perform in this fight against Michael Johnson. And for Michael, I think he's got no pressure at all heading into this fight. So kind of I'm not going to say that he's going to get upset, but the stage is kind of set here for him.
Yeah, Johnson had a lot of pressure, obviously, against Dustin Poirier, and couldn't have handled it any better during fight week and on fight night. So we'll see how he does against Khabib Nurmagomedov. Another FS1 UFC 205 prelim here. Tim Kennedy minus 225. Rashad Evans plus 180. Among the many predictions I made, Kenny, when we were at ESPN that hasn't gone right, I predicted that Tim Kennedy would win a major promotions middleweight championship by this point of his career. Now, part of it has been inactivity for one reason or another. Certainly the Yoel Romero fight, which I thought should have been a win, ended up being a setback that sort of took him out of immediate title contention. Rashad Evans moving down to middleweight for the first time in his UFC career, and I don't mind the move. I just think it's a tough opponent, man. I mean, Tim Kennedy makes for about as suffocating a night at the office as any fighter on the roster in any division.
There's no doubt about that. And Rashad really has two opponents here in this fight. He's got the weight, making the weight for the first time, getting your body down, and then having the confidence to go out there and perform at that weight for the first time. So I'm a little bit nervous for Rashad in that regard. I think he's going to make the weight, but then it's having the confidence to go out there and say, I'm going to perform, I'm going to have my body move better or as good as when I was fighting at 205. And that is going to be a little bit of a hurdle for Rashad, who kind of mentally has struggled a little bit. I think that he hasn't shown his true potential, despite being a 205-pound world champ in the UFC. I still don't think we've seen the best of what Rashad has in his game. And if that comes to fruition here against Tim Kennedy, I think he can win this fight. He can wrestle. He can stop those takedowns against Tim Kennedy. Rashad is very good with his wrestling and jiu-jitsu game as well. He does have knockout power. I think he's got more power on the feet than Tim Kennedy. He just has to let those hands go. Tim Kennedy is very confident. He's going to pressure you. He's going to grind you down. And I think he's going to come with a lot of pressure early in that first round to try to tire Rashad out and take away his confidence.
Outside chance that this show will be broadcasting live from the Black Zillions training camp next Monday to talk to Rashad Evans about this fight. I'm fascinated to see where his head is at. And I also hope we can grab Tim Kennedy because I'm really curious what his MMA aspirations are right now, because I stand by the fact that on any given Saturday night in 2016, 2017, Tim Kennedy can be the number one 185-pounder in the world. You saw obviously what he did in the main event against the current champion Michael Bisping. He hasn't gotten over that proverbial hump. There have been times in Tim Kennedy's career when there have been big fights against, I believe, Jacare Souza. Did he fight Jacare? I think he did. Or maybe it was Rockhold, but there have been big spots at times where Kennedy has just fallen short. Certainly the Romero fight comes to mind. I got to think at some point Tim Kennedy is going to break through. First order of business for him as he gets back will be against Rashad Evans coming up at UFC 205. So plenty more coming up on 205, the pay-per-view, the prelims. Yeah, Tim Kennedy lost to Jacare for the vacant Strikeforce title belt. Thank you, TJ. So wasn't off base on that. So next week we're going to do more on UFC 205. We'll try to bring on some of the fighters as well, of course. And we will also solicit your tweets at Kenny Florian Pod. Any question you have that is UFC 205 related, we're going to try to get to over the next 2 weeks here on the show.